Once again, we are live. The Black Press's historic coverage of the 2020 election. And this is hour number 4. This is the first time that the Black Press has brought you wall-to-wall coverage of this most consequential election. And we want to bring our esteemed publishers back in. And also we are joined by our president and CEO, Dr. Ben Chavis, Al McFarland of Insight News, Trini Williams of the Star News, Larry Lee in Sacramento, and Dr. Nasinga Burton. Welcome back. Dr. Chavis, what are you seeing so far?
Well, it's a very close election. I'm very proud of the Black Press all over the country that has not only reported the news, the authentic narrative of Black Americans striving to make sure that our votes are counted, to make sure that our issues are addressed, and to make sure that people are elected at the local level, the state level, the congressional level, and the national level that represent our fundamental interests. So this is a most consequential election, and I'm very pleased that the Black Press has played a critical supportive role, a critical advocating role, and making sure that the narrative fits the reality that Black people face on a day-to-day basis. So it's a close election. From what I'm hearing, it's too close to call in North Carolina. That there's still a lot of uncounted votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and in Ohio. And Al McFarland can tell us about Minnesota, and I know Brother Lee is in California. So we can get, and Trina is there in Tennessee, so we can get a quick, and then Dr. Nzinga, you're in Georgia. And I'm glad to see that we have a brother in the runoff for one of the Senate seats. So I think that it's going to be a long night, Stacey. I don't think anyone can declare a winner at this point because all the votes are still being counted and documented.
Yep. And speaking of Al McFarland out in Minneapolis, Al, we had the George Floyd situation there. How have people responded to this election?
Surprisingly or not surprisingly, people are motivated, they're inspired, they're fired up, they're showing up, and they are clear that their voices matter and that this time is critical. I think I'm so impressed. Yesterday, I drove around the corner from where I live at the Urban League building. They were doing early voting there. And a crowd of our people, my neighbors, a block and a half around the building. And so I think this was replicated all over Twin Cities. The early voting was taking place up to the end of that. And I think today we had great numbers as well. I think that our vote is, in fact, motivated by the George Floyd experience and the recognizing that George Floyd is happening simultaneously all over the country. That our incidence is not unique and it's not the first or the last time this phenomenon continues. But I feel there is a commitment to challenge it, to stop it, to bring our voices to it in a way that we will not again be insulted by acting like they're not killing us while they kill us, right? So I think we're speaking up. We're speaking out, and we're speaking up by showing up in the community, showing up at the polls as well. We're going to deliver Minnesota back to the Democratic Party, I believe, and right now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are at 57% of the votes that are counted so far, with Trump at 40%. It's a 17-point spread, but hopefully it'll stay that way all night long. One good piece is that our 5th district representative, Ilhan Omar, has substantially claimed and reclaimed her seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. She, at this point, is showing a 64% of the votes cast for that that House district race. Her opponent, however, a brother, African-American man, Lacey Johnson, running as a Republican, got a surprising 25% of the votes cast so far. So that's telling. It tells me that there's a lot of uneasiness in the Black community, solidly Democratic, but still a sense that our voices are not being heard and a willingness to step away in certain cases. So it's interesting.
Well, thanks for that update, Al McFarland. Larry Lee, Sacramento, well, actually, not the president. Joe Biden has won California. That just came in just a few minutes ago. What's the scene? You're in the Capitol, so what's going on there?
Yeah, well, California has been trending Democratic for several elections, obviously, and I think that we didn't get really too many visits from the Trump campaign coming out this way. I think they already knew that they wouldn't want to spend too much time in California because it is decidedly blue. I think one of the telling things that you'll probably get from this election in California is you've got a real diverse coalition of kind of a moral awakening of folks who have recognized that the events of the last 8-9 months have been very traumatic for the African American community. So you'll see a lot of people from other cultures that are stepping up, standing beside, not letting their silence continue to paralyze them. And they've been actively involved in Black Lives Matter and other things as well too. So when you're out here in California, you'll see people of all cultures standing up on behalf of African Americans. And so that's good. However, there are some things to pay attention to during this election. We have one of the most impactful things that has impacted the African American community over the last quarter century has been the absence of affirmative action. Prop 209 dismantled affirmative action about 24 years ago, led by Sacramento's Ward Connerly. And so that has been a devastating impact on our community, and it's back on the ballot for this election. It's one of the state propositions. We had 12 state propositions, many of them very confusing for California voters. And so that's something that I think as a state, we've got to take a look at to find out how to make sure we don't have, proposition overload for our community. Literally billions of dollars was spent on both sides of the fence on many of these propositions. The gig economy was on the ballot for this election, as well as I said, Prop 209, or the what is actually it's Proposition 16, really to try and bring affirmative action back. That has been a call by many people throughout the state for several years. The challenge within that has been what looks like the Asian American community somewhat split. It has been decided, almost categorically that they have benefited from the end of affirmative action as far as the UC system goes. But affirmative action not only applies to UC admissions, but it also applies to procurement and employment opportunities, and that has had a traumatic effect on our community. So we're waiting to see how that is. Polls literally just closed at the top of the hour, and so there's been about 10 million votes cast in California in early voting. I applaud our state. We do a wonderful job of making sure votes are cast pretty easily. I went around today myself to kind of look at a few polling places, and it was minutes to go in, go out. We even had our Golden One Center was opened up. The arena where the Sacramento Kings play was opened up for voters. It's been opened up for about 10 days or so. And so it's been pretty easy to vote out here. And we are standing in solidarity with our African-American folks throughout the country who are braving long lines and long days to cast their vote.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Since Trump rode down the escalator at Trump Tower to announce his run for the presidency, accusations of racism have dogged his administration, whether the charges are founded or unfounded. Trini Williams, Do you believe that the tightness of the race is a matter of voters that are also racist, or a question of voters that don't care that his administration has been accused of racist behavior?
But I believe it's a combination of both. We have some people who are racist, and they admit being a racist. I remember talking to a gentleman about why some people feel like supporting certain people who they know are racist or are trying to support supremacy, and they say, well, it doesn't matter about economic status. They just want to make sure that they can have a way of looking more superior than someone else, like the black community or the Native Americans or the Asians or the Latinos. And because of that, people will thrive behind or run behind a candidate just on the simple fact that they can feel better about themselves. And so we have some that are like that, and then some that just don't matter to them. They want to support a Republican candidate, or they just want to go with that flow of that same thing, whether it's truth to the matter or falsehood to the matter. They just rather support a candidate, even knowing that that's not the best one.
Yeah, and right now it's like you said, it's a very tight race. It's something that many of our panelists have already said. We probably won't know a winner tonight. Dr. Nsinga Burden, what's your read as we speak? I understand Norman Rich just put up the electoral college right now. Is Biden 192, Trump 114?
All right, so it's the first person who gets to 270, right? So that's what we're looking for. So we're still very early in the race, which is why you go to sleep and you think somebody's going to be president, and then you wake up and you find out it's somebody else, that along with voter suppression and all these other things that happen. But to get back to the question of racism, I think that in America, people often think, and just so you all know, my PhD is in the intersection of race, class, gender, and sexuality. So, you know, but in America, people seem to think that racism is par for the course. So there are a lot of people who won't, who will vote for Trump because they don't care that he's racist, because they think that it's okay to be racist, right? It's foundational to the founding of our country. And even though there are a lot of us who no longer think that way, particularly in the ways that we did before, maybe you don't exercise your racism through violence. But maybe you have other types of racist ways of thinking or being or ideologies or what have you that are pervasive and passed down. And so people don't really see racism as the other pandemic. The way that we talk about it in our community, the Black community, is that racism is that other pandemic we're always dealing with, always facing. Whereas other people, because they don't have to interact with it, they experience it differently. They come here and they get to check white on their census, so they're no longer white once they get here. So they don't see race in the same ways that we see race, or define it even in the same way that we define it. And so I don't think racism, unfortunately, is a disqualifier for people, even in this day and age, although I think many would agree that it should be. Can I talk a little bit about Georgia, though?
Go ahead.
To get back to Mr. James's question, Dr. James's question. So Georgia is really interesting to be watching. One person we should be paying attention to is Nikema Williams, who is the person, heir apparent to Congressman John Lewis's seat, the late Congressman John Lewis's seat, and representing the 5th Congressional District. And she is, I can't think of an intelligent way to say, beating the brakes off of her opponent right now. So it doesn't look like anything's going to happen. We're not going to go to sleep and Nikema's going to win the seat and wake up and the other candidate is going to have it. Nikema is decidedly that. But what I think is interesting about her is that she's also the head of the Democratic Party. She's young, she's dynamic, and she's also already been a state senator. So you have, this momentum that has been growing in Georgia around statewide politics is happening under the leadership, particularly as it relates to the Democratic Party, under the leadership of a young Black woman. So I think that has to be discussed. It is not really being discussed outside of Black media. And that is important. We also need to be talking about Lucy McBath, who is also winning in her district, her congressional district. She is running against, she is the mother of Jordan Davis, who was murdered in Florida. And and she's running against Karen Handel again, who just will not go away. But that seat has traditionally been held by Newt Gingrich. So the fact that she won it in the first place is historic, and the fact that she looks like she's going to win again, although we could go to sleep and wake up and it could be something else, but it looks like she's decidedly going to win that seat again, is a big deal. And then lastly, something we should talk about or definitely be thinking about are some of the ballot measures, one of which is the ballot measure to waive sovereign immunity. So in Georgia, you can't sue your state, even if they do something that's unconstitutional, or they pass a law that's against the U.S. Constitution. They pass a law that's against the Georgia Constitution. You cannot sue them. So right now, 73.5% of the votes that are in, and that's about 2.2 million people, are reporting that they want to waive the state's sovereign immunity, which will allow residents to seek relief through the superior courts from state or local laws that are found to violate the U.S. Constitution, state constitution, or state law. So that is very important, particularly as it relates to Black people, particularly as it relates to the killing of unarmed persons that keeps happening all over the country, but certainly in the state of Georgia. When we live in a state that is really where we have a governor who is in lockstep with the current president and really does whatever he tells him to do. Hence our horrible handling of COVID here in the state. That has actually gotten us banned in other places. So I think those are really important things to be paying attention to in Georgia, in addition to whether we're going to turn the entire state blue. It's looking purple. And of course, Raphael Warnock, Dr. Warnock, is going into a runoff with Kelly Loeffler, which is a very important race. And if we can win that, then we'll have our first Black senator. State senator, senator, so U.S. senator. So we have lots of good things and important things happening here in Georgia that we should be paying attention to, and the country should be paying attention to as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that's a lot better than Tennessee.
And Trini Williams, Star News. Where are you?
I'm actually in a lobby where we're having a campaign watch party for Marquita Bradshaw. She won the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. Senator Lamar Alexander's retiring. But on her results, she really has done well by having a fraction of the funds. She's got 35% of the votes compared to Bill Hagerty's 62.5% of the votes. And she's already spoken to the crowd here tonight, to actually just go ahead and congratulate Hagerty on winning the election, because we already have 89% of the votes here. And of course, Trump has won the majority of the votes here in Tennessee as well, with about 65%. One thing to know about Tennessee is that out of 98 counties, only 2 of them are Democratic counties. One Nashville, the other one in Shelby County, where Memphis is. And there's one other one that may be Democratic, but it's a totally red state. We had another contention in Arkansas, where, of course, Trump has won that as well. But there's another African American who ran for U.S. Senate, Ricky Harrington, but he only gained 33% of the votes compared to Tom Cotton's 66% in Arkansas. So that's pretty much a dumb one there at 77% of the votes. Now, Mississippi, this is the most interesting run that I see in the Mid-South and the tri-state area of Memphis. And that is with Mike Espy and Cindy Hyde-Smith. Now, right now, they only have about 47% of the votes. Mike Espy is trailing 40% to her 57%. But it's only 47% of the votes accounted for right now. Surely and hopefully, now we have a correspondent there who's on the executive committee, Mississippi Executive Committee, who's actually watching and checking things out. They will be up all night making sure that those votes are going to be counted. And because of that, we're looking at maybe Mike Espy, who's been an advocate for the community for many years. He may come out on top. but we won't know until all these votes are counted, and they're not even at 50% just yet.
Yeah. Dr. Chavis, it's a long night, Dr. Chavis.
It's gonna be a long night.
Right now.
It's gonna be a long night. I'm a little hoarse. I've been on the radio, television, social media since 6 o'clock this morning. But that's part of the job, not complaining. But I was just on with the BBC. People all over the world are watching America, particularly Black America. The cry for Black Lives Matter just wasn't a domestic cry. It was all over the world. It was global. And of course, the coronavirus is also global. So you have the pandemic of white supremacy that is international, but it's certainly heating up in the United States. And a lot of these far right-wing groups around the world are watching how America deals to see whether or not democracies can be more inclusive or less inclusive, to see whether democracy can be suppressing people's desire to have their vote counted, or to make it more prevalent, more easy to vote. Because the United States, even in spite of President Trump's leadership, or the absence of leadership for the last 40 years, the United States is still a beacon light for so many people around the world. And so there's a lot riding on this election. And I think that you're right, it's going to be a long election. And I think that the Black press, we're going to be called on more and more, not only by our brothers and sisters who live here in the United States, but our brothers and sisters throughout the African diaspora, throughout the world, because what happens to Black people in America determines what happens to other people around the world. Mm-hmm. You know, American foreign policy grows out of its domestic policy. So if domestically you have a policy that's stemmed in white supremacy, stemmed in voter suppression, stemmed in mass incarceration, stemmed in taking people's health care away, that gives green light to other repressive forces around the globe. So when Jim Clyburn said this is the most consequential election of our lifetime, it's just not consequential for Americans. It's consequential for all of humanity. And so we're still hoping and praying. I'm going to have to get out my prayer rug and hope that things continue to move. There's still a lot of absentee ballots that have to be counted. There's still, depending on the how they're counting mail votes, particularly in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. So a lot is not determined yet. So I don't want anybody to lose their hope or lose their faith based on what has happened thus far. I think what it shows is that the country is divided. The United States is divided. But also, I think what doesn't get enough attention is that here you have an incumbent administration that's struggling to be reelected. If they had done a good job, this would have been a runaway election. It's not a runaway election because of the coronavirus, and it's not a runaway election because of the unfulfilled promises that were made 4 years ago. And again, I think other than the Black press, Stacey and colleagues, I don't think the mainstream press is paying enough attention to Black America. Mm-hmm. I think we get attention when there's a tragedy like George Floyd, or a tragedy like what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, or a tragedy with Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. But I think that we're going to have to make sure that whoever wins the White House, whoever becomes in control of the Senate, that we keep our demands, keep our points of view, keep our issues to the forefront. I think Freddie Douglass said it best. Freedom is a constant struggle, and power concedes nothing without a demand. And right now, the way we make demands is with our votes. And so hopefully all of the brothers and sisters who did vote will have those votes counted and won't have those votes somehow not counted. Although, as we speak right now, Republicans are in federal court and in state courts trying to deny the right for some of these votes to be counted, even as we speak right now.
Well, as we know, too, the most important count, right, is the Electoral College, and currently it's showing a 209 to 118 lead for Biden. And of course, as Dr. Burton had highlighted, you need 270 to win. The popular vote currently stands at 51,018,248 for the president, 50,273,343 for Vice President Biden. So the popular vote is extremely close, but the most important vote, the Electoral College, is at 209 to 118 currently. So it's a toss up, as they say, still, right? Larry Lee.
Well, it would be poetic justice for Trump to win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College vote.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, that was a question I posed earlier in the 10 o'clock hour, and Larry, go ahead.
Then he'll sue to change the Electoral College.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and so what do you see there, Larry? As you and Dr. Chambers just was bantering about how ironic that would be, because we remember Hillary Clinton won by more than 3 million votes in popular votes anyway. Tables turn, Larry. Can you see?
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think the Trump campaign is really all about noise and their own narrative, and so they have been better at making more noise than those who are opposed to the same policy, or opposed to have different policies. And so I think that's been one of the things. So it really, he is masterful at sowing chaos and disorder, and obviously spreading disinformation. And so he has worked really hard for the entire time. He's been campaigning ever since he's been in office. He's never been, served as president. He's been campaigning the entire time. And the entire time he's been in office, it has been about really delegitimizing the electoral process and voting in and of itself. I think that is tragically, it's very scary, the way he really sows that narrative, and really many of his supporters just buy into it. If anyone should feel like the electoral process has been rigged over a long period of time, it should be African Americans. It has been rigged against us for generations, but in the way that he says it is not a rigged process. But he's what do we call it? Hedging his bets, right? No matter what way the outcome is, he's got a narrative that says why he is being, picked on. The billionaire who nobody seems to like.
And Trini, I know you had a comment, but before that, I wanted to let everyone know that Chris Bennett, the publisher of the Seattle Medium, has joined us. Chris, welcome.
Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Chris.
You're on mute, Chris.
Is that better?
Yes. That's a whole lot better.
All right.
I can hear you at least.
Good evening, everybody.
Good
All
evening.
Right, hey.
Good evening.
So Chris, you came in, but I'm gonna throw this to you and Trini. I'm gonna let Trini go first, and then you can follow up on this. Chris, have the past 4 years, Trini, been a real life lesson in old-fashioned high school civics? Are Americans more aware of how their government functions or break down?
I'll say they're probably more aware of how the government breaks down in a lot of ways. We had a broadcast a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about how Senator Lamar Alexander was talking about Dr. Fauci after the president had kind of defaced Dr. Fauci, saying he had told people this and that. But Senator Lamar Alexander, he's going out of office, so he can say whatever he wants to say. He said, well, Dr. Fauci has served 6 presidents. And if Americans followed his instructions, we'll be back in school, in our businesses, and eating at our favorite restaurants. He didn't say who America was, but we know who America is in regards to number 45, President Donald Trump. Now, we know that Donald Trump, he may have done a couple of things in regards to international relations and things that may have been beneficial, just a little bit, but we've seen a lot of downfalls based on just personal behavior. We cannot have a president who runs the country based on how he personally feels. We need a president who's going to represent all the people at all times, no matter what party they come from or not from any party or whatever. We need someone who's going to make it happen for the majority of the people in the United States of America. People.
I think we lost Trinity. Chris, you want to jump in?
I'll jump in. It's one of those things that it's when people are in high school, and you talked about high school civics classes, and you're in those courses, and you're kind of you're going through the motions, but at the back of your mind, you're like, why am I studying this? How is it going to be relevant to me in my everyday life, especially when I get over? And this is a prime example of why you need to pay attention in class, because certainly we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 4 years. We learned the importance of what it means to elect people who serve your best interests. We learned the hierarchy of how things are run in America. We learned firsthand about the 3 different tiers of the government and how they're separate, but they all play a vital role in what's going on in this country. And so, if not more than anything else, the last 4 years has really taught us that we need to pay attention, not only pay attention to issues, but pay attention to our community, but pay attention to the people who are trying to represent us, no matter where they are on the ballot, whether they're a local person, as a city council person, a mayor, a governor, and particularly here, when you talk about congressional people, senators, and as you also talk about the person who's going to be the president of the United States of America. And so I think that this has been a wake-up call to America. I think this is one of those things where, we've learned some very tough lessons over the last 4 years. But, these are not lessons that we can't grow from, and these aren't lessons that have taken us out. But it is very important that we pay attention to politics, and especially when you talk about African Americans. African Americans, tend to say that they're not political and that they're not really into politics, and have a lot of different reasons why they may or may not vote. But at the end of the day, politics controls our everyday lives here, whether you want to believe it or not. People are making political decisions based upon a number of things. They're making decisions based upon what your utility rates are going to be. They're making decisions about your school and the resources that your schools are going to have. They're making decisions about if you're going to have proper police protections in your neighborhood, or how many traffic lights you're going to have. If you're going to have dividers down the street that'll have a divider between the lanes. So if there's somebody coming from the opposite side of the street, and for whatever reason they swerve onto your side, they can't get there because you've got a concrete divider. Well, we don't always have those concrete dividers in our neighborhood. A lot of times the things that we have in our neighborhood are toxic. We're next to a landfill that nobody knew about from 40 years ago, so they put a new housing development on, and those are in our neighborhoods, and they're selling those to us, and we have no idea that we're sitting next to a toxic waste dump until years later, when our kids are developing some chronic medical issues. We're experiencing some chronic medical issues, and so I think that this is a lesson that we all have had to learn. And unfortunately, some of us didn't pay enough attention in civics classes, and I fall in that category, because I was one of the people like, why am I ever going to use this? And today it comes full circle, and I wish 4, 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that more of us had paid a little more attention to what was going on in those classes, and understanding how these elections impact our lives, not only on a short-term basis but a long-term basis.
Yeah, Chris. Al McFarland, reports from Joe Biden's campaign headquarters just a minute ago they feel the race is a little tighter than that they want it to be right now, but at the same time, they say they are confident. Your thoughts, Al?
Well, right now, with 60% of ballots counted in Minnesota, the Biden ticket is leading 54.5% to Donald Trump's 43.4%. So there's still, it's a good spread. It's 10, 11 points, but earlier it was 17. So the gap is narrowing here in Minnesota. And there is concern that, and the Republicans do feel they have a genuine chance to turn our state. I don't think they do, but time will tell as the votes continue to count. But I wanted to pivot a little bit, Stacey and Dr. Ben, to say how important what we are doing is. I am so proud to be a member of NNPA, and I'm so pleased with our capacity to collaborate and use technology to create conversations between us and among us that allow us to speak to each other and to speak to the universe at the same time, changing the narrative by telling our truth. And it's simply the visionary leadership that we all have been part of, but that you, Dr. Chavis, have really brought forward in the organization that creates opportunities like this one right here, where we are talking to each other about matters of consequence that not only affect our individual and family lives, but affect people around the world. I got calls today from relatives in London saying they're up all night watching because what happens to Black London is connected to what happens to Black Minnesota. I can tell you that this question of George Floyd, the feeling here, our community is saying that we feel we are ground zero. We are the epicenter of the change that is occurring on the planet. So there is an articulated experience and expectation that what we see and do and go through moment by moment in creating relationships and in creating new narratives is of major consequence. And I think that us doing this is part of that same movement, that same dispensation. So I talked to Trini before we went live here, and I said, what are we going to do, Trini, if this group wins or that group wins? And my answer to my question was that we have to keep moving with the thought and the feeling that victory is both imminent and inevitable, period. That we will win, we must win. And we're going to redefine what winning is. Winning doesn't mean somebody else has to lose, but it certainly means that we have to win. And so I want to get a sense of how my colleagues feel about how we progress 12 hours from now, or 36 or 48 hours from now, when we get the results. There's this trepidation about the shutdown, lockdown of our vision and opportunity by a Republican win, but there is also an expectation of doors opening if the Democrats, in fact, take control of the White House and perhaps the Senate. So how do we begin to articulate to our community through our media the visions of the inevitability of our power, our success, and our victory? Dr. Ben, it's a question I'm raising, but that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Well, thank you. I think it's a very good question. I'm putting the mic close to me so you can hear me. But I believe you raised the right question. And I would like to hear our colleagues answer. But I would like to put on the top of the agenda the issue of reversing the gentrification of urban America. I think Blacks are being put out of the urban center. We have to put ourselves back in the urban center through economic development, through strengthening our Black-owned businesses. And all of our member publishers, these are Black-owned businesses that need to be strengthened. And I think that one of the things we did not do under the Obama administration, which I hope we will do under the Biden administration if he gets elected, is that we can't just have discussions about economic development, about reclaiming the urban center to make sure that Blacks are not displaced. I think we have to make it as a priori prerequisite. And I think that Senator Kamala Harris, being vice president, if she's elected, gives us an opening. Most people don't know when she first ran for statewide and attorney general. The black press, Larry can talk about it, the black press really supported her in her first statewide election. And then when she became a U.S. Senator. And certainly the black press has been very supportive across the country of both Biden and Harris. But to me, defining what is winning, if I understand you, Al, which I agree, winning for us has to be not only who wins at the ballot box, but who wins in terms of the property and the entrepreneurial progress of our community. I think that's something that we have to do. Well, we spend over $1 trillion in the U.S. economy. Very little of that money comes back as reinvestment in our own businesses and in the communities in which we serve. And I think that we probably don't talk about economics enough. We probably don't demand quantitatively what should be accountable and our deliverables. We have delivered the black vote to the Democratic Party. Now, what will the Democratic Party deliver back to the black community, and particularly for black women? If it wasn't for black women, the South Carolina primary was a turnaround for Joe Biden, a positive turnaround. And I think that, to me, part of the answer, Al, is that I hope that the black press will lead this effort. And Stacey, I think we should use this forum not only on election night, but I think we should use this technology and these forums ongoing, not just on Martin Luther King Day or not just during Black History Month, but every day, every month, every hour, every second. We are vocal, we're visible, we're impactful as we raise the concerns that are vital to the longevity of our community. I think all the issues that Chris Bennett lists, you're absolutely right. And I think that we need to redefine what we mean by the word engagement. There's a lot of talk about the word engagement. But to me, engagement is that's not the metrics of our impact. Engagement has to be also defined as the economic as well as the political results of our participation in the democracy. And right now, I think we've more than shown that we can impact the body politic of the country, but we have not shown that we can impact the economic progress, the economic inclusivity. We're always left out waiting for a handout. And I think that we should talk about now how to build our own institutions, our own businesses, our own communities, not in a segregationist perspective, but an inclusiveness and diversity perspective that we have to continue to demand.
And Dr. Chavis, just an update. Apparently, Joe Biden has won Arizona, becoming the first Democrat to win that state since 1996 when Bill Clinton won it. And now, according to projections, there are now two paths for Joe Biden to win the presidency. Winning Arizona, which is what is being projected, and the Northeast and Maine districts and the rest of the Midwest. That's without Pennsylvania. But if he also wins Pennsylvania, he would just need to win the rest of the Midwest. So Biden has won Arizona. He's projected to have won Arizona, becoming the first Democrat to do that in 24 years.
Stacey, can I just say one thing? Arizona was the last state to pass Martin Luther King's birthday as a state holiday. But since that vote, what Clovis Campbell said should not be underestimated in the earlier panel. The demographics of Arizona is changing. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the country, particularly in the urbanization of Maricopa County. And that's where the majority of those votes came from, that's now being counted. And I think I've been spending a lot of time out in Arizona lately. There's so much economic opportunity in the western part of the United States. And that I think that African Americans, we need to rethink also how to redeploy where we put a focus on the development of our communities. And not only, so we not only see a political map, but we also see an economic map that can help, give the buoyancy to what it means to be a Black American.
Yeah, and another note there, the singer, before you speak on that, it is now estimated that Arizona is leaning Democrat to went from leaning Democrat to likely Democrat in the Senate race there. So Arizona is doing some pretty big things as far as the Democrats are concerned. The singer, you had something?
Oh yeah, I wanted to. Am I on mute? Oh yeah, I wanted to say as an educator that one of the things that the Black press does very well, just to kind of support what Mr. McFarland said, is that we educate in ways that other people don't. Even if you look at our panels tonight, you have people actually breaking down and discussing not only the political process, but also how but the political process and how this election is working and how the numbers are coming in. I think we also need to think more critically. As a professor, I'm alarmed at the lack of critical thinking that people have. So, for example, when we think about, an exit poll with Republican voters, their number one topic is the economy. But in exit polls on Democrats, their number one topic is racism, followed by the pandemic. So how the economy can be number one on your list, but you're not paying attention. The pandemic is less than 5% care about that, but you don't see the correlation between the two, right? The pandemic and the impact on the economy, job losses, wages, all of those things is a problem. The fact that you can't see even how racism impacts our communities from an economic perspective. Derek Hamilton talks about that a lot. Dr. Derek Hamilton. Fantastic, fantastic scholar and activist, talks about that a lot. And so I wanted to say, to co-sign on what Mr. McFarland was saying, and then what Dr. Chavis had said, in terms of how the Black press has just a greater role to play. And that is also one of educating, not, propaganda, but like really teaching people what it is. And so, yeah, you should be getting into school. As Chris said, he kind of was like, why do I need to know this stuff, right? So it kind of is like you're learning this stuff through middle school and high school or whatever. And if you're not a history or poli-sci major in college, you might not ever really use it that much. But we need to think about that educational component and really teach people how to think about these elections and to think about these issues in critical ways so that we can make smarter decisions and not think the economy is great just because we're rich, right? Or because we're doing well. And what does that mean and how this economy is attached to, Mr. McFarland's relatives in London. There's a reason why there's a connection, why what happens here impacts, Black people, people of African descent overseas. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add.
Well, we got about,
if I could, I know.
Yeah, Larry, we got about 11 minutes left. So I'm going to let everybody go around, starting with you, Larry. And then Chris, and then Trinity, and then Al, and then the singer, and then we'll end it with Dr. Chavis.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. I think, respectful of time, I want to, I really want to just add to what Dr. Chavis said. I think what he said is really critical, and even comparing it to what Nzinga just said, relating to exit polls and how people view different things. The reality is, at the end of the day, politicians come and go, administrations come and go, but the real building up of our community really falls within that space of the economics and the economic growth. And I think what we have to look at is that certain things are scaring people. When we talk about, and let's be honest, when the Obama administration came in and many things started to change. You had the Tea Party, you had the beginning of, all these right-wing militias that that were forming up, and then this effort to say that the left was, pushing a socialist agenda and things like that. Many of those things were because really at the end of the day, they're worried about their demographics and they're worried about their economics. And those are the things that I think, many of us within the Black press need to be very mindful of, with trying to make sure that we are educating our community, just like you said. And also, politics is a local thing. I'm sitting here. You guys have watched me kind of look back and forth at our computers because our polls just closed at the top of the hour, and so I was watching. We've had 2 seats by African Americans on our city council that I'm watching that are up for runoff here, and it looks like they both potentially could lose. It's still early, but a lot of the precincts had already reported. And one of the races, it's 53 votes between the top 2 candidates. And so, we've got to be very diligent on trying to make sure that the energy and the mindset of, the protest and those types of things get turned into political and economic power for our communities.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, Stacey, I think one of the things that I want to make sure that doesn't get lost this evening or in the coming days is the impact that the Black press and the Black community has had on this election. Regardless of the outcome, the reason why so many of these races were so tight in so many states across this country was because of African Americans, and part of it has to do with gentrification as well, right? We no longer have Black neighborhoods in some areas in the state of Washington, in Seattle. We no longer have a Black neighborhood, but we still have a Black community. When you lose your neighborhoods, one of the things that you lose is the impact of having all these Black businesses that you can support on a daily basis. So it gets harder to bring us together economically. And so we have to be a little more creative, and it's up to our publications to be more involved in helping to get us to circulate those dollars amongst one another. But when you're looking at all the exit polls, you're looking at the data and what made these races so tight, and they're talking about these suburbs in Atlanta, they're talking about Cobb County, and they're talking about Gwinnett County, all these places where African Americans didn't live back when I was at Morehouse College, and they now are out in these areas, and those areas are the ones that are making these races competitive, because the suburbs are really turning the tide of some of these elections in red states that are now trending blue or purple or whatever they want to call it. So I think that, we need to make sure that we tell our story about what our community did. When we go back to this election cycle, win, lose, or draw, we always go back to South Carolina. And we talk about the Black community and the way they came out in the South Carolina primaries to even make it so Joe Biden would even be the Democratic candidate. And then we talk about across the country how tight this race is based upon African-American turnout in areas that people don't want to give us credit for, but we're living there and we're voting in these areas. And I think our influence is growing, not only within the city limits, but across the boundaries where we live. And I'll be real quick, Stacey, because I know we're running out of time. In the state of Washington, we're in the process of probably sending our first African-American to Congress, in Marilyn Strickland. And she's leading right now. So we hope that trend continues. But more importantly, when we talk about local politics in the State House, it was just a few years ago that we were struggling as a Black community to make sure that we had one representative in the State House here in the state of Washington. Tonight, we have the opportunity to put 11 people in the State House if the voters come out and vote for them. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think that's going to be a trend that's going to continue across the country. And the Black press is definitely going to be a part of that.
Yeah, and before we get to you, Trini, there is reports of an outbreak of violence in front of the White House at this moment. So just wanted to update you on that. It's to be expected, right? Trini?
Yeah, I'm here in Washington, but some of that is contrived. I'm very close to the local community here in Washington, D.C. And some of these people are being shipped in by forces that believe it's in the interest of the current administration to have a disturbance, so they can leverage, whatever they intend to do if they lose the election. So I think we should always be very, very careful
Right,
about,
right.
we will send some reporters out and get the actual feedback on what's going on,
We
Stacey.
do have a reporter there at the White House, so we're waiting for him now to get us the, like you said, the accurate word on that.
Right, exactly, because this whole call for law and order, this whole call for denying people's right to protest, those are echoes from the past. Those are code words. Those are buzzwords. And even when I voted today up in New Jersey, black folks were nervous. They were scared to go to the polls because they heard there was going to be so many, white supremacists to try to stop them from voting. So, this whole fear thing, we have to, and this is the role of the black press, we have to certainly inform our people of the truth, but we inform our people in a way that inspires them, that encourages them, that gives them the fortitude. I think what Chris Bennett said is so important. There are a lot of victories that have been won as a result of African-American participation in this election. Things that Nzinga has outlined and the ballot initiatives. So I think we're probably going to have to do some comprehensive reporting many days after this election so that people can see the complexity of the vastness of the impact of the black vote in 2020.
And Trini?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Trini.
And you're all right, Dr. Chavis, as well as Chris and everyone. People are afraid. That's one of the questions I've heard, inquiries I've heard over the past few days. The fear of an outbreak in their communities from people who are rebelling against the election results nationwide. However, we don't have to be afraid. We have not been given this thing of fear. We must have faith. We must have a sound mind. We must continue to be the best we can in all situations. In regards to what we were talking about earlier about the black press, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the black press all over the country has a plan that we must put in place, and that is to address all these different issues and challenges that we have in the black community. We shouldn't leave it up to our elected officials to do that. We as the black press can set that tone all throughout the United States and then present that to our elected officials locally and nationally so a change can be made. Dr. Chavis, I'm willing to take the lead on that and help formulate that type of idea that we can actually put out there in regards to our health, in regards to our education, in regards to our economics and businesses, in regards to every area that we need to cover. And that way we have those things covered in our publications each and every week, each and every month throughout the year, and then present those to our local, state, and national elected officials so the black community can have what we need regardless of who is in office. We have to put these people to the fire right now so we can get the change right here in our black community, not just for a little while, but something that'll last throughout our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children. I was in the Marine Corps, and I was telling Brother Al about this. Being in the Marine Corps, you don't leave anybody behind. You're only as fast as your slowest man. And the African community has been put down so much to be depressed and deprived in so many areas. The country can't progress as much as it can until we are brought up to the place that we deserve. So we have to work towards that effort to make sure that we can get paid properly. We can have the good businesses in our communities. We can have the education, the health, and wellness that we need in all those other areas as well. And the black press, Silver Star News, National Newspaper Publishers Association, and all the others, we are ready to make that thing happen.
Right, Trump has won Ohio by all projections. Al McFarland, go ahead, but the important Electoral College vote is 209 to 118 for Biden, and who now leads the popular vote by a little bit more than 1.5 million votes.
So, 4.7% to Trump's 43%. with about, I think, 60 plus percentage of the votes counted. So we've got a lot of waiting to do here. My final comment tonight, however, though, echoes what Brother Trini said and what you've expressed, Dr. Chavis and Chris and Larry and Singa. I think that we have a duty and an obligation to seize the high ground, the moment, and to be insistent in telling our truth. And the truth that we bring is a truth that the world is ready for right now. We must believe that first and act in that belief. Reflect, model. What truth telling is what we've done all the time. That's really the mantra and the motto of the Black Press. But now more than ever, our voice is critical and our voice is important. And I think that we should use every available resource, strategy, platform, technique, and technology to amplify our vision, our voice. And I think that we should write and report inside of a context. And the context should reflect a core belief of the inevitability and the imminent occurrence, victory for us, our people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the clock has struck midnight, Nsinga. Will it strike midnight on the Trump presidency?
Hope springs eternal. No, I really believe that change is slow but sure. One of my friends just texted me and said Georgia will never go blue, and I said, hey, they used to say that about Arizona, right? So you just never know. We have not finished counting. This presidential race is too close to call. There are so many other races and other concerns we need to be paying attention to as well. People are so fixed by the presidency. And it's like, no, you need to be worrying about who your attorney general is going to be. Like there are other folks that you need to be worrying about that are going to affect your everyday life. So I would just say to people to really just practice self-care. I know it's nerve-wracking. It's going to be a long process. There are counties in Pennsylvania that aren't going to start counting until tomorrow. We had the dust up at the State Farm Arena here in Georgia. So Fulton County is behind in the counting. So, it's going to be a long process. Do not get discouraged because it's not a blowout. No one was anticipating a blowout. And even if there's certain states that are disappointing to you now, we still don't know all of the states yet. So, keep hope, as Mr. McFarland keeps telling us. Victory can be ours. We've survived more. We are, we built this country. So, maybe I sound arrogant or what have you, but I would like for people to be more thankful to what we have done and our ancestors have done.
Amen.
We will survive. We've survived worse, and we will survive this if we do not get the victory that we want in the presidency. But the true victory is that Black people are always on the right side of history, and remember that. Remember that.
Amen.
Dr. Chavis, you want to take us home?
Very simple. Black lives matter. Black votes matter. Black press matters.
That's right.
Well, you heard it all tonight. 5 hours of unprecedented coverage by the Black Press, the National Newspaper Publishers Association.
Stacey, you deserve a raise.
There's the boss right there.
Yeah.
Good work, Stacey.
Well,
You too, Dr.
It just can't happen without we don't have what you call it credits, so that role. But Dr. Chavis, our president, Karen Carter Richards, our national chair, Claudette Perry, the executive administrator, Norman Rich behind the camera. That the team is the team, and all you publishers, make it happen and make it worth it. So, and Nsinga, you've been a champion. So we thank you so much. Thank everybody for joining us. We will bring you updates. Keep watching Black Press USA. Look at the Seattle Medium, the Sacramento Observer, the Star News, the Insight News, and all of the Black Press publications for the latest. We know when you go to bed tonight, you won't have results or full results, but we will follow it. And we promise you that. Everybody stay safe and stay well. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.
Right.
Good night.